Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be doing something slightly different for the main reason of now when my family comes across any type of like weird, depraved, suspicious type of story online, they send it to me, which I highly appreciate because I do think that is a true marker of love. My mom sent me this story, right? And it's all very suspicious and really I want to figure out, am I a jaded bitch? Which the answer is yes. But in this particular case, am I being jaded? Is something up? We need to discuss this together. This is a story where basically we have to decide if we think someone is being conned. Homeless handyman and the wealthy widow. Love or something darker. Now I'm gonna say I did have a little bit of a bias starting this off because I do think that the homeless are often dehumanized. So almost by definition, when there is an article involving someone who is homeless or was homeless, a lot of the times the way in which they're going to be characterized is questionable at best. So you guys know, I assume that most people don't have good intentions because that is the person I am. So I'm not the type of person who's like, everyone's there to give you a hug and smiles and rainbows. No. But also, let's not jump to conclusions just because of someone's life trajectory, life experiences, so on and so forth. So already this title, you know, obviously they have to make it catchy or whatever. A homeless man moves in with a much older, wealthy woman. Is it a genuine love story or something much darker? Carolyn Holland was a wealthy widow aged 80, living in the idyllic Californian beachside resort of Cayucos when she met David Fout, a man 23 years her junior. He came to do some odd jobs for her. Within weeks, they were a couple declaring their undying love. Now that, I will say, is a red flag. Generally speaking, if someone is declaring their undying love after a few weeks, for me, that's a restraining order. I like the idea of falling in love madly, deeply, whatever. We gotta stay grounded in reality though. And it's also like, if you're catching feelings that fast, if you're the one catching feelings, you should ask yourself a couple questions, and also probably don't tell the person immediately because they're gonna go running for the hills. Carolyn said she'd never expected to fall so deeply in love with a stranger or to be having a romantic sexual relationship at her age. He's given me something special because of his caring spirit. We share a lot. I love his personality and I hate it when he's gone. I'm going to take care of her as best I can unless I can't, Dave told me. All the guys know that Carolyn's my girl and I don't mess about. I don't stay out late because I have someone to go home to. I'm going to remain until the wheels fall off. However, her daughters saw things in a different light. They believed that Dave was out to con and fleece their mother and would break her heart. I learned about Dave and Carolyn's story because I live on their street. Their pace of life is slow in Cayucos and people take time to sit and chat. There's a pier that stretches out nearly 1,000 feet into the ocean. In the evening, as the light fades, you can see the surfers outlined against the setting sun. It's the perfect setting for a love story, and I wanted to believe in Dave, but like Carolyn's family, I was also suspicious. Was Carolyn about to fall victim to financial abuse, which affects around 1 in 5 of the over 60s? I will say this, the thing that he said of wanting to take care of her is nice, but it's also very easy to say, oh yeah, I'm gonna take care of someone, whatever, hoping that, you know, they're gonna, and you can get the check. So I'm gonna say it's suspicious and unlikely, but I think it's the whole thing put together because there's the age gap, which again, isn't an issue for me in this particular case, but it is something to keep into account. There's the age gap. There's the fact that he randomly is doing odd jobs for an extremely wealthy woman and they fell in love extremely quickly. All of these things, I don't know. If you're rushing to do things, tendentially, I would say you know that something's up and you want things to you want to experience things really quickly because you have a feeling it's going to be over really quickly. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying that that's the case here, but I will say that generally. The age difference really bothered me. That was a red light, Carolyn's niece Kim told me. Why would someone that age act like he's in love with her except to have a place to stay? I was in a unique position to watch the story unfold. Everyone involved wanted to talk. Carolyn's daughters welcomed a chance to give voice to their worries. Dave and Carolyn thought they were being wrongly judged and wanted to tell their story. When I first met Dave, I really warmed to him. He'd been recommended to do some renovation work for me by a neighbor through the local church where he was a regular in the congregation. Dave charmed all the other workmen on the job. He played the harmonica and guitar. He was very funny and seemed very open about his past. The more I heard, however, the more I understood why Carolyn's family were alarmed. Dave had arrived in Cayucos homeless and was living rough, sleeping out by the pier, when he first showed up at Carolyn's house to do some work. He readily admitted he'd been a crystal meth addict. It had led him to drug dealing and eventually made him so paranoid that he was jailed for making pipe bombs that police believed were linked to a possible attack on Walmart. Dave was, and still is, convinced that the supermarket chain was intending to microchip us all. Now, this is aside from any kind of potential taking advantage of the elderly. This is a whole red flag. The whole bomb thing, the drug thing is what it is. I'm not judging that at all. I think that in the scope of all of this, that is a mere detail. Someone having substance abuse issues, that is a detail here. The pipe bomb, the believing that we're being microchipped by Walmart though, those are serious things. Those to me say something's up, and it might be untreated mental illness. And again, you guys know how I am about mental illness. You just need to take care of it, but you do need to take care of it before it spirals. Specifically, if you're having paranoia and things that can affect your grasp on reality. I mean, take care of everything, but specifically things that are that serious. Even just the effect that that would have on whoever you're with. Dave claimed to have given up drugs, but I noticed he drank quite a bit and smoked a lot of marijuana too. Carolyn's daughters, Susan and Sally, were horrified by the change in their mother's personality after she met Dave. It's like a fantasy world. It's so bizarre, Sally said. She was like a teenager when he came along. She was doing all this weird giggling and laughing. The daughters didn't believe for a moment that what they were witnessing was love. What they saw was a lonely old woman in need of a companion and a cunning outsider on the make. There was also a question of inheritance. With her late husband, Joe, Carolyn had built up a property portfolio worth a few $1 million. Now, I will say, as much as I am jaded, I do think that people become particularly stupid when they're, in love or infatuated. So the giggling or whatever, I think we've all been I think we've all been in the position where you just act really fucking stupid. I think part of it is just because you're so happy and pleasantly surprised that the horrors of the world do not effectively always persist. So there's that. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that is telling. I think everything on his end is more telling than someone acting stupid because they like someone. The few $1 million. Now that's interesting. It's interesting that of all the people, this is the person that he went to do some odd jobs for, and then they fell in love so quickly. Again, it's possible, blah, 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 not being completely negative, but it's our family's money. My parents worked hard for that money. Should we be okay just giving it to some loser? She asked me. Now that's harsh. But then again, I don't know what all they've seen that we haven't seen. Carolyn's daughters believed she was already losing mental capacity when she met Dave. They tried to have her declared mentally unfit to manage her own affairs. They think I have Alzheimer's, Carolyn told me. Yes, I forget a lot of things, but I have too much stress. I can make my own decisions. Her relationship with Dave was pushing Carolyn apart from her daughters, but she felt she had every right to have the partner of her choice. Carolyn said they had not given her the support she needed after their father's death. They never came to see me before Dave. Honestly, they did not. Her daughters disputed this version of events. Susan, who lives 5 hours away, said she wished she could have been around more, but both she and Sally were bringing up children and working full time. We tried to include her in everything, she said, adding that her mother was reluctant to get involved. Now, this is a part where I need to be suspicious of the daughters because sure, you have a full-time job, you have children, that is, I can't imagine how busy that is. I already think I'm busy and there are no children in sight. So, okay, I'm not going to judge that. That being said, are you showing up now because an inheritance is in the question? It's obvious you don't want the money to go to some rando, sure. But is it because you also don't want it to go away from you? So it's not that you're worried about your mom, it's about what's in the bank? I'm just wondering, because it would make sense that they would actually show up now that they think that there's danger that their parent is being taken advantage of, that the money's gonna be gone, all of those things, those make sense. But is it all of those things or is it one of those things, aka the dollar sign? That being said, I did have a family member who didn't have Alzheimer's, had dementia. It's not the same thing, but it did include a lot of forgetting and a lot of not recognizing people. There is the thing that there were so many people who tried to take advantage of my grandpa when he was in that condition because they could tell that he couldn't recognize people and that you could easily con your way even into someone's house because you're like, hey, I'm so-and-so, how do you not recognize me? And it's like, so I can understand that, I have to say though. Before Dave came along, Sally, who lived closer, had helped her mother with her accounts and tax returns. However, the rift prompted Carolyn to take back control of her finances. Not long after, Carolyn co-signed a credit agreement with Dave, allowing him to buy a $40,000 van. I asked her what would happen if Dave disappeared, leaving her to cover the full cost of the loan. She said she didn't mind and she didn't care what her daughters thought. Yes, they think they're protecting me from David, but David is the best thing that ever happened to me. What was the truth about Dave? I saw him coming back to Carolyn after a day's work, cooking her dinner and reminding her to take her meds. It was moments like this that made me believe he genuinely loved and cared for her. But I also witnessed him in town, boasting to his friends that soon he would never have to work again. See, like that to me is real fucking weirdo behavior. So giving her the meds, all of that, that's nice. But the going to your friends and showing off that you're never gonna have to work again is very big weirdo behavior. Also because it's one thing, if you were homeless, I can imagine that it would be a relief, right? So it would be one thing to be like, this is so much stress off my back that I might not have to work. Saying that is one thing. Being like, I'm gonna be loaded, I'm not gonna work, I'm not gonna be a broke ass bitch anymore like you guys, that would be a different story. So it really depends on what you're saying and how you're characterizing it. Because if you are making it seem like you won the fucking lottery, then yeah, everyone's right to be suspicious of you. All of this is suspicious, all of it. All of it. I don't want to jump to conclusions and say that this guy is taking advantage of her, but there are so many things that line up where I'm just kind of like, isn't this all so convenient? I decided to investigate his past. What I found was a dark history of domestic violence and child neglect. One relationship had ended when he suspected his partner was unfaithful and he beat her up. In an earlier marriage, there was a baby daughter who nearly died from neglect. The child had been sold by Dave to a couple who eventually legally adopted her. Sold. That is so grim, so grim. I think there are a lot of things that you can move on from in the sense of, in my perspective, if I met someone and they told me that they did thing X, Y, or Z in the past, a lot of it I think I could move on from because the past, blah, 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 whatever. There are some things that does not pertain to. Selling a child, that does not pertain to, oh, it's in the past. Like, bro, this is not you calling someone a bitch in high school. This is you selling a whole ass child. When I spoke to him, Dave would say this was all in the past. He was a churchgoer now and he'd made a pact with God to lead a better life. He'd come to Cayucos with nothing and saw his relationship with Carolyn as a sign that their relationship was meant to be. Look what Jesus blessed me with, he said. I couldn't leave her because I'm supposed to be here with her. Would you be with your child if that child was a millionaire? Like if your baby had millions of dollars in the bank, would you have not sold the baby then? I'm just trying to figure things out because isn't it convenient that ye old friend Jesus said, oh, you know what? You're gonna meet this woman who's way older than you and who's fucking loaded and who's gonna magically fall in love with you. Isn't that convenient? Isn't it convenient that the person that Jesus picked for you wasn't someone who's also struggling or wasn't even just someone who's average? Jesus for you, specifically, Jesus to reward you for your good behavior in baby selling was like, you are going to find a rich widow. I'm sorry, this is heinous. But their story was soon to reach a tense and bitter climax. One of Carolyn's properties was a single plot with 2 homes on it in a nearby town. Dave persuaded her to put the house on the market even though one of them was rented out to her grandson and his family. Carolyn's daughters were furious, believing that he was taking advantage of their mother's mental fragility. They showed me footage from a security camera of their mother looking bewildered as Dave showed estate agents around. Carolyn promised to give him some of the $600,000 from the property sale to Dave to provide for his future. The sale quickly went through, and a check made out to Carolyn was waiting to be collected from the agents handling the sale, but at that very moment, she was admitted to the hospital with COVID. Carolyn had refused to be vaccinated on Dave's advice. He'd convinced her that the vaccination program was a process of government control. By the time she was sent home, Carolyn's poor physical and mental state had allowed her daughters to gain power of attorney status, giving them control over her financial affairs. Carolyn died soon after. The COVID was not what killed her, says Susan, but definitely didn't help because she was already declining. The daughters didn't allow Dave to visit Carolyn during her last days, and they didn't call to tell him she died. There was no funeral either because the daughters were upset at the lack of support they thought the local church had given them. Susan and Sally still feel that their mother was taken advantage of and that nobody, doctors, police, or care services helped them. Everyone's hands were tied, she said. They were not seeing what we were seeing. Man, that's so sad that she passed away under those circumstances with this impending situation. It's also interesting that he said to not get vaccinated. Now, obviously, someone who thinks that Walmart is microchipping people will probably be against any type of medical care, I'm assuming. But I also have to wonder how much of that was strategic and malevolent. You know, like if you have an older person that you do not want to survive, how convenient would it be for you to tell them to not take something that might help them survive if they did get COVID? There are 1 million people in the UK with dementia, a third of them undiagnosed. It makes them extremely vulnerable. After hearing Susan and Sally express these concerns about their mother, I spoke to 2 expert geriatricians about what they had said and the issue of financial abuse, which is an increasing problem in both the UK and the US. According to Dr. Mark Locks of Weill Cornell Medicine and colleague Dr. Jason Karlowish from Penn Memory Center, financial capacity can be one of the first things to decline when the brain is damaged through disease or age. They want this process to be identified as a condition they call age-associated financial vulnerability, a pattern of risky behavior that is inconsistent with choices that would previously have been made. Dr. Karlowish says financial decision-making is very challenging cognitively. Even with mild cognitive impairment, you can make mistakes with finances, even though you're otherwise doing generally okay in your daily life. The doctors tell me that half of the patients who come into the memory clinic in New York have been conned. I'm gonna skip some of the medical stuff because being hypochondriacal, reading about dementia and stuff like that doesn't mean no well. For families like Carolyn's, there's a dangerous gray area surrounding mental capacity and the right to self-determination in later life. It's not an unusual tale either. The geriatricians say they hear similar stories all the time. Back in Cayucos, Dave is homeless again, although he has the van that Carolyn helped him to buy. He's parked in the same spot he was when he first arrived in town, trying to make a living selling jewelry and artworks made from recycled items. The last time I saw him, he was kind of in a trance, flicking a lighter on and off and telling himself over and over that he loved Carolyn. When she called, I came. I miss Carolyn. I loved Carolyn, he told me. I was on my little mission trying to make her proud. So this last bit, I don't know if the writer meant to imply what effectively is implied, but it does sound like he's on drugs again. And I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, but the being in a trance and flicking a lighter on and off and kind of talking to yourself, I don't know. I don't know what all of that is about. Again, that could even be a part of mental illness. It could be grief. It could be all of the above. I don't know. I'm just going to say from the implication of the article, I would maybe surmise that something occurred in terms of potentially relapsing. This being said, I would really like to believe that this was not actually a con, but my brain is like, this definitely was a con. There's no way that this wasn't a con, in the sense of, I feel like there are too many factors aligning that do not actively make sense. And yeah, we can have the whole discussion of how love doesn't make sense and when you're in love, everything else doesn't matter and whatever. But if we look at the factors lined up, I mean, it's all extremely convenient, isn't it? You randomly have to do some like house job thing for a person. This person ends up being Carolyn, who has millions in properties. Carolyn is 20 years older than you. You casually end up falling in love really quickly. She ends up giving you money from sales of her properties. You convince her to sell off 2 properties one of which her grandson and his family were living in. What conclusion are we supposed to come to here? Because if the fixation, or the priority really was to just take care of her and be there for her and all these nice, wholesome things, why was the real estate part of the equation whatsoever? And it's also like, after just a few weeks of knowing someone, it's very weird to feel comfortable enough to have estate agents over and show them around. Like, I think that's probably the biggest red flag for me here, is that how do you feel comfortable enough doing that in someone else's house with someone else's belongings, mind you? Like, you're not even married yet and you're going around showing a house for sale, a house that you're casually going to get a cut of. I was really hoping that there would be something redeeming in this story that would make me think that this man was not straight up just trying to con, but it really looks like that. And I mean, at the end of the day, he still got the van out of this. So he still got something out of this that he wouldn't have had otherwise. And granted, maybe he actually does miss Carolyn. I hope that it was real and genuine, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.